Welcome back to another video. This really popped when I saw it. That to me is a monster increase. Again, this book got hot. This book is ready to go higher. So let's jump right into it. We are back today with another statue review from Diamond Select Toys. Without further ado, let's get into the review. What is good, YouTube? This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles, and thank you guys for joining me for another video here on the channel. Today we're going to take a look at my amazing Spider-Man run, including my AF-15. I'm going to show you some of my favorite covers out there, from Steve Ditko to John Romita, and to some later on issues like Todd McFarlane. I'm also going to break down the keys. But before we get started in the video, like always, I remind you guys, if you're not a current sub of the channel, do me a favor, hit that sub button, smash the like button for me because it really does help the channel out. And if you're interested in following me on Instagram or on Twitter, here are the links below. With that said, let's check out some of my favorite books. Of course, we're going to start off at the beginning, and that is with a copy of Amazing Fantasy 15. But before we get into this book, I want to remind you, I collected ASM 1 through 301. I'm not going to show you every book in this collection, just the keys and some of my favorite covers of all time. Now, I've been collecting Amazing Spider-Man since I was a kid. I've had a lot of these issues since I was a kid, and of course, able to pick up more as a young adult, and then, of course, finishing it off over the past 7 years, getting back into collecting, just able to complete this run last year, 2023. But again, we're starting with the king, Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man. My copy is signed by Stan Lee in a CGC 2.5 witness signature off-white to white pages. So this is the gem of my collection regarding Spider-Man. I absolutely love this book. There's zero chipping. There's just a little piece that's missing here on this corner. But other than that, I cannot ask for a better book. Next one up is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #1. Of course, this is the first Spider-Man in his own solo title. Fantastic Four crossover. And of course, is the first appearance of the Chameleon and J. Jonah Jameson, two of my favorite characters as well. Now, this book is a 0.5 off-white to white pages. It's got that great Spidey label, but the reason it is a 0.5 is because, I've said this before, it is missing the back cover, okay? So this is one of the only books in my collection that is actually missing something, but I figured the deal that I got on this book, I think way back when I paid like $2,000 and change for it, so I got a great deal. It presents like a 3540, just a great copy to have. I didn't feel like upgrading this book because I do own an AF-15. I just wanted to have an ASM 1 in the collection. So my ASM 2, the first appearance of the Vulture, great colors on this book. That's what really attracted this to me. I did have a lower grade copy in the collection at one point, but decided to go ahead and get rid of that and keep this one here and keep it raw. Look at the colors of Spider-Man. I mean, the top of this book, top left here where the logo is a little bit faded, but other than that, little piece out, but a great looking copy of the first appearance of the Vulture. And don't forget, that's the third appearance of Spider-Man as well. Again, one of my favorite books up next is Amazing Spider-Man #3, the first appearance of Dr. Octopus. This presents like a 4.0, but because you can see there is some tape residue here on the right corner. Unfortunately, that does hurt the grade a little bit, but either way, a really nice presenting book. I used to own a 1.8 CGC copy, decided to get rid of that and keep this one, which is a nice raw, beautiful colors to this book as well. Up next, another big key, Amazing Spider-Man #4, the first appearance of the Sandman. We all know this 4-square cover, one of the best that was done early on by Steve Ditko. Again, this book is a little bit faded. There is a little bit of detachment here on the bottom left corner. You can see a little piece missing there. You know, probably a solid 1820, but other than that, great first appearance of the Sandman. Well, here you go. I didn't show you this. I cracked this out of a CBCS slab that was a 2.0 cream to off-white pages. So I do that a lot. I buy books that are graded and then crack them out, keep them raw, because it's just my preference right now with my Amazing Spider-Man keys. You can see a little bit of a date stamp there as well. Up next, another book which I'm absolutely in love with, and I'm actually looking to try to get another copy also. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man #5, that great Doctor Doom crossover cover. Now, I've said this before in the past. We talked about first appearance of Doctor Doom. I want to own that FF5, but this to me is the second book you have to own, more so than that Doctor Doom cover. I think that Marvel Premiere or Marvel Presents book that there is with the black cover with Doctor Doom on it. To me, this is a better option only because it's an Amazing Spider-Man key as well. This is one of my favorite Steve Ditko covers. covers because of the shading he did here with Spider-Man. Another one it's really hard to find in nice solid shape. This one's about a 2.5. Of course, the next key we're going to take a look at is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 6, the first appearance of the Lizard. Again, this book is probably around a 2.0, 2.5. A lot of these books I do not collect in high grade. I don't see the value in spending a ton of money on high grade copy of this book. I really want to just own the books because I'm a big Amazing Spider-Man fan, but here we have Amazing Spider-Man number 6, first appearance of the Lizard. You can see a big crease here along the top right-hand corner of the book. But again, another undervalued key in my opinion. Here we have our second appearance. It is Amazing Spider-Man number 7 and the second appearance of the Vulture. The big thing with this book, you can see right here, is a little bit of a chunk missing from the cover of the book. A little bit of a chip out right there as well. But other than that, the colors present pretty well, which is nice. And again, like my shirt says, like I always say, I don't want to overpay for second appearances. I think I paid around $100 for this book way back when. So to me, not going crazy on second appearances is my thing. So again, I just wanted to have this book for the collection, but a decent copy. We're going to go to Amazing Spider-Man number 8. Again, another great Steve Ditko cover. One of the better ones, in my opinion, that he did. A great yellow cover to boot with the two, of course, circles in it. Peter Parker's fight with Flash Thompson, we all know. Either way, it's got a Human Torch appearance, but a great yellow cover. I wanted to mention it. Of course, here we have another key issue, Amazing Spider-Man number 9, the first appearance of Electro. Again, one of also my favorite vintage Spider-Man villains. A very underutilized villain, in my opinion. I used to love him, and I've said this before on the channel a million times. It was a great, I think, Sega Genesis game where they had a great battle with Electro in that game. And I always thought it was an underutilized character. They really should have used him more, probably because of the costume. We all can't forget how ridiculous this costume is. I'm glad they changed it when we got to No Way Home. But either way, a great key, definitely worth owning, and to me, still undervalued as well for a great Spider-Man villain. Up next, of course, is Amazing Spider-Man number 10, first appearance of the Enforcers. Now, I cannot find this book for a cheap price anywhere. It was one of the first issues I really had to pay up to get just to kind of complete the run. It's a really low-grade book. I think the cover is nearly detached here. You can see the spine is quite messed up. It's a little bit off-center. It might even be detached at this point. But either way, the first appearance of the Enforcers, not the best cover in my opinion, but an issue I had to have to complete the run. Another second appearance, one of my favorite covers from Steve Ditko as well, Amazing Spider-Man number 11, the second appearance of Dr. Octopus, the return of Doc Ock. Again, this is another book that is probably around a 1.5 to a 1.8 in my opinion. This book is really expensive for a second appearance. I know he's a very popular villain when we're talking about Spider-Man, but either way, with the purples and the greens of this book, which really remind us of Doc Ock, this one I always see for around the same grade for over $300. I think it's a little bit too much to spend. I think I paid around $150 a few years back. I don't remember, but either way, had to add this one at some point. Up next, another yellow cover, Amazing Spider-Man number 12, The Unmasking of Peter Parker by Dr. Octopus. Again, another great yellow cover, like I was saying. But again, this one can be had for a decent price. I've seen it at my LCS for around a couple of $100. I think this one is probably like a 2.0, 2.5. Don't remember what I paid for this book, but either way, a must-own for all Spidey fans. Let's get back to some keys. Here we have a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 13 and the first appearance of Mysterio. This book probably in the 3.0 to 3.5 range, but the colors present nice. That's what I really go for when I buy books. I try to buy books with very vibrant colors, complete obviously, but again, another raw book. Again, to me, Mysterio is one of those characters that they really should use more often. A great character, one of my faves growing up as well. Let's get to one of my few slabs that I still have in my collection, and I'm actually thinking about either cracking this book or finding a raw copy. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 14 and the first appearance of the Green Goblin. This one in a CGC 3.5 off-white to white pages. Again, not one of my favorite Steve Ditko covers. Again, with the yellows and the greens and the purples, it pops a little bit, but other than that, it's a little bit of a weird cover, I always thought, but classic key, first appearance of a major villain. That's why I'm keeping this one slab just for a little bit longer. Up next, we all know what it is. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 15 and the first appearance of Kraven the Hunter. Again, this book really presents nice. I believe I cracked this one out of a 3.0, 3.5 if my memory serves me correct. But again, Kraven was one of my all-time favorite villains growing up. Reading that Kraven's Last Hunt storyline, which was one of my favorite storylines, at least Spider-Man storylines growing up. So to me, again, a very underutilized villain. I'm sad to see, where that character went and why it ended so abruptly. But regardless, a beautiful purple cover. Up next is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 16, of course the first Amazing Spider-Man and Daredevil crossover. This book is not the book that we are going to give away for the 7,000 sub. This is my personal copy. You guys are going to get a 1.5 to 1.8 graded copy, raw book. It has a little bit of tape on it, but regardless, this book is actually a nice presenting copy. It is very dirty for what it is, but I did not want to overpay for this book. To me, it is just a nice crossover book, a nice early Daredevil to boot if you're a big Daredevil fan. For me, I just wanted to own the book. Next up, we have a second appearance. It is Amazing Spider-Man number 17, and the second appearance of the Green Goblin, of course, featuring the Human Torch as well. Again, a nice purple blue book, kind of reminds me of ASM 39 or even 18 to boot. And speaking of 18, here it is, Amazing Spider-Man number 18. This is actually the first appearance of Ned Leeds, one of the books that I acquired early on when I got back into collecting. Again, the colors really pop in this book. Is really what I look for in Amazing Spider-Man, but again, a small key that nobody seems to talk about. First, Ned Leeds. Here's a book that's been all over the Hot 10 over the past couple of years. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 19 and the first appearance of Matt Gargan. Again, a book that can become a little bit expensive, especially when we get to mid to high grade. But again, I think I picked up this copy for around $150 some time ago, but presents pretty nice, a little bit faded, not too bad. If you could find this book really, really white for a great deal, I would definitely pick it up. Just don't want to overspend for this book. This is a book I'd probably overspend on. This is the first appearance of the Scorpion, Matt Gargan. This is Amazing Spider-Man number 20. Again, this book can be had for relatively cheap in mid-grade, going for around $500 or less. My copy, unfortunately, at the top left-hand corner is a little bit of a damage right there, but other than that, it presents pretty well. Again, a nice undervalued Spider-Man villain. I hope we get him in the next Spider-Man 4 movie in the MCU. We can only hope. Up next, we have another minor key. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 25. If you guys didn't know, this is the first cameo appearance of Mary Jane Watson. And this book can be had for relatively cheap. I remember I had like a 3.0 or a 4.0 copy that I sold last year, and I was hunting to try to find this book back in a raw form, and it was crazy expensive. But I was actually able to pick up a copy for around $175, and that presents beautifully. Another great yellow cover done. This one done by Steve Ditko as well. We're going to jump to number 28. This is the next key. It is a copy of the first appearance of the Molten Man, Amazing Spider-Man number 28, a great black cover. If you like black covers, this one is definitely a must-own. Super hard to get in high grade. Either way, this one's like a 3.5, 4.0. Beautiful copy. One of the first books I picked up about 7 years ago when I got back into collecting. Let's jump to another key, a double key. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 31 and the first appearance of Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy. A very undervalued cover in my opinion. Two very important characters in Spider-Man lore. Still too cheap in my opinion. You can go out and get like a 4.5 for like $250. So if you're a Spidey collector, this one's a must-have for cheap. Then let's get to a classic cover, classic story. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 33, the final chapter. Of course, very classic cover by Steve Ditko. We saw this homaged a little bit in Spider-Man Homecoming, again with Peter Parker trapped under the rubble and he kind of explodes through it. But either way, great storyline, great cover, very undervalued book in my opinion. And here we have it, my favorite cover in comics. And this is one of the most special comics I own in my collection. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 39 and the first John Romita on the Amazing Spider-Man title. So you can see my copy is a CGC 5.0 off-white to white pages signed by John Romita and Stan Lee himself. So to me, this was, when I saw this book, I knew I absolutely had to have it. Great story here. Somebody was actually auctioning this book off on Instagram and they weren't getting any takers, and I decided to ask the guy, hey, you willing to just sell me this book outright, because he had no bidders at that point. And he discussed it with the owner of the book and they said, yeah, I made him an offer, and believe it or not, I bought this book for around $500, which is crazy considering it is a double sig CGC yellow label with a Spidey label to boot. So to get my favorite cover signed by my favorite artist and Stan Lee, one of the creators, was just mind-boggling for the price I got it at. Of course, John Romita's second work on Amazing Spider-Man 40 leaves nothing to be desired. Another great cover with the fire in the background, the reds and the yellows. Of course, the end of the Green Goblin, but he doesn't die in this issue. But great storyline, great cover by John Romita Sr. And you guys want to talk about great covers by John Romita Sr. and of course an undervalued cover. It is Amazing Spider-Man number 41. This my copy signed by John Romita. You can see right under Amazing there in the trade dress in a CGC 4.5 off-white to white pages. One of my most favorite books in my collection because you just don't see this book signed by John Romita. You don't see a lot of books signed by him in general, but to get this one for cheap like I did, man, I was just incredibly lucky. So again, here we have another second appearance. It is the second appearance of the Lizard, and one of my favorite John Romita covers as well. A little bit too dark for me, but look at the Lizard here. This is like pure, unadulterated Lizard, how he should look in every comic book, in my opinion. Just totally classic. This is why I love this cover. But again, not really a key outside being a second appearance. I picked this book up for like $50 way back when. Again, another book I picked up for I think $40 at my LCS Zap Comics. Another great Lizard cover and a yellow cover to boot. Amazing Spider-Man number 45. This one is probably a mid-grade 3.540, but again, presents very well. The colors are great on this one. We'll get into 46. It's the first appearance of the Shocker. Again, an important villain. Didn't really turn popular till we got that Spider-Man series in the late 80s, early 90s, but ASM 46 can still be had at relatively cheap price. I believe mine is a 3.5 to my recollection. I could be wrong, but either way, a nice solid cheap key. We're going to jump all the way to Amazing Spider-Man 47 and this great John Romita Craven cover. Again, one of my favorites that I picked up when I got back into collecting mine. I wish it was a little more white, especially on the edges here. You guys can see a little bit of foxing here and there, but other than that, a really nice presenting copy. All right, so next up is one of my favorite books in my collection. I picked this one up a few years back. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 50, the trifecta. You guys heard me talk about this before. First appearance of the Kingpin classic cover by John Romita, and of course the Amazing Spider-Man No More storyline. This copy happens to be signed by Stan Lee and John Romita Sr. in a CGC 8.0 off-white to white pages. Now I picked this book up from A1 Comics out in California a couple of years back, and I cannot tell you how I was ecstatic to pick this book up signed by both of those creators. It just means the world to me. Some of these books that are double signed, you know, they're more rare than some of these books out there, and that's what makes them special to me at least. But you guys know this is one of my favorite books, just to get something that's double signed, just like that ASM 39, totally worth it in my opinion. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Again, another second appearance. Here we have Amazing Spider-Man number 51 and the second appearance of the Kingpin. This one was a little bit more expensive. I did not want to pay up for what I did. I think I paid around $100 for this book at some point just to get this book in the collection because it's one of the final pieces that I needed to add to complete it. But either way, not too bad for a second appearance of a major villain, but to each his own. All right, so here we have another key. Now check out the price that I got this book for, guys. Can you see it on the top right? $15 for a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 55 in this iconic John Romita Sr. cover with Doc Ock and Spidey in them glasses. I remember telling you guys that I saw the original art for this book sell for around $360,000 at New York Comic Con a couple of years ago, but to me, this one to pick up for 15 bucks was a no-brainer. Up next, we have another key, Amazing Spider-Man number 56. And of course, this is the first appearance of Captain Stacy. Again, another underappreciated cover, in my opinion, with the newspaper. Still can be had for relatively cheap, around $40 to $35 in mid-grade. Then we have a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 59 and the first cover appearance of Mary Jane Watson. Again, another book that can be had for relatively cheap, under $100. You can find it from mid to fine grade. So if you're a Spidey collector and you're looking for keys, this is definitely one I'd pick up for cheap. Then we have one of my favorite covers. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 70, this great spotlight cover by John Romita Sr. Again, another book that can be had for relatively cheap, around $40 to $50 in mid-grade. If you're trying to make a run or you just like collecting Spidey covers, very underappreciated in my opinion. We're going to jump into Amazing Spider-Man number 90. This is, of course, the death of Captain Stacy. Again, not a key that people talk about all the time, but again, can be had for a relatively cheap price. It's going up in value. I have noticed that. Some people want over $100 for this book, which I didn't really want to spend. I don't remember what I paid for this one, but it is a mid to low grade copy. I didn't want to, spend up too much money. It is a great storyline, but to me, not a tremendous key, but a key nonetheless. Then we're going to jump into the drug issues, Amazing Spider-Man number 96. As you can see, I picked this book up for $1,500. It is a low-grade copy. You can see right there in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a little bit of damage. We could jump into issue number 97, a great Green Goblin cover, one of my favorite Goblin covers, but again, another drug issue. And the last of that drug issue, Amazing Spider-Man number 98. I picked this book up not too long ago at the Clifton Comic Show. They had it for, I think, $40 or $50, and I ended up paying, I think, $30 or $35. But again, another book I needed to complete my run. But these drug issues are definitely collectibles. So if you're an ASM collector or any collector of Marvel around that time, I like picking these drug issues up. Back to the keys, we're going to jump to Amazing Spider-Man number 101 and the first appearance of Morbius. Now, again, this book went nuts early on when we got that news that Morbius was going to have his own movie, and of course, I knew that movie was going to be terrible, so this book really dropped in value, and now it can be had for like mid to fine grade for only around $250 to $300, which I think is absolute steal for an Amazing Spider-Man villain. Again, Morbius is one of the cooler villains that they have, not the vintage ones, but here we start to get into like the silverish, approaching the Bronze Age, stuff like that. I think this one still is a Silver Age book, but correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless, if you want to own a Spider-Man villain book that is not too overpriced, Morbius is definitely the way to go. And of course, the next issue is his second appearance as well, Amazing Spider-Man number 102. And again, my motto is don't overpay for second appearances. The sticker price for this book is $38. I probably paid like $30 or less on this book. But if you like collecting second appearances, buy them for cheap. Don't overspend. That is my motto. So again, we're going to talk about next a book that is one of my favorites in my collection. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 121. Of course, the death of Gwen Stacy, we all know what it is, but I have a great story for this book in particular. I found this book for $20 in a long box when I first got back into collecting, and I could not believe it. This cover particularly is one of the best that has ever been done in comics, in my opinion. So not only is it yellow, but all the faces of Spidey, all these people meaning something to him that affect his lives and affect his storylines, it really does mean something. So this is an extremely important book that still can be had for cheap. I have a second copy of this one coming on the way to me right now, but I picked up for like $200 or around that price range. So definitely a book that can be had for cheap. And of course, here we have, you know what it is, the death of Green Goblin. Again, that storyline continues after Gwen Stacy dies. Again, another fantastic cover by John Romita Sr. This copy, unfortunately, has a sub-crease on the right-hand side, so it's not really not worth a ton of money. A little bit of writing here as well, but I just wanted to complete my run at this point without going nuts. But again, a great cover by John Romita Sr. But I'd rather have the 121 if I had to pick. We're going to jump to Amazing Spider-Man number 124 and the first appearance of the Man-Wolf. Again, of course, this book shot up to the moon when there were rumors out there that Man-Wolf is going to be a part of No Way Home. Didn't happen. Regardless, it has come crashing down. I just picked up another copy of this book for I think $40 from a live sale recently. Just a great first appearance that can be had for cheap. So we're going to jump now to one of my all-time favorite covers. It is, of course, Amazing Spider-Man number 129. You guys know I have this original art homage done. This Gil Kane and John Romita cover is one of the best covers ever. Another yellow cover book. These yellow cover books, man, they really seem to pop. People go after them. But this is a CGC 6.0 off-white to white pages. Ton of copies out there of this book, so just get your copy if you want. You don't have to go get the highest grade available. Of course, it is a Bronze Age key, so you want to pick up, the highest grade you can. But to me, I love the Punisher. I love Spider-Man. Just a very clever cover that to me has been, so appreciated over time. Gil Kane is one of the most underrated artists of that era. He did Marvel Premiere 15, a bunch of others, but to me, this is his best artwork in my opinion, and a big Spider-Man key. We can jump to Amazing Spider-Man number 134 and the first appearance of the Tarantula. Again, not a big key, but a cool cover. This gets confused sometimes with the Spectacular Spider-Man number 1, a very, very similar cover, so be careful out there. But again, don't overpay for this book. It should be half around $50, in very fine, mid-grade, or whatever you want to spend. I just don't want to go crazy for a first appearance of Tarantula. Really not that worth it. So let's get into a book that is worth it, in my opinion. Amazing Spider-Man number 135. The second Tarantula, guys. This is also, at some point, was called the second appearance of the Punisher. Now I think it's referred to as the third appearance of the Punisher. Regardless, this cover is awesome. It reminds me of 121 with all the characters that affect Spider-Man's life, things that are going on in his life right now. Just so undervalued, so underappreciated. John Romita really just fucking knocked this out of the park. I always look for this book in cheap price, you know what I mean? If I could find a decent copy for around $100, that's like a fine or maybe a very fine, I will always pick it up because it is iconic. Here's another key that people don't really talk about is Amazing Spider-Man number 136, and this is where Harry Osborn becomes the new Green Goblin. Again, this book can be had for relatively cheap, $25, $30, possibly even $40 in mid to fine grade. So if you're new to Spidey collecting, this one may be one that you could start with for cheap. I absolutely love this storyline as well growing up, so of course we got to see it play out in the original Spider-Man trilogy. Not the way we all wanted to, but either way it was done okay. Very, very cool storyline. Next up, we're going to jump all the way to Amazing Spider-Man number 194 and the first appearance of the Black Cat Felicia Hardy. Again, one of my favorite Bronze Age keys if we're talking Spidey. 129 and this one probably take the cake, but because this is a black cover, a little bit harder to get in high grade, but there are a ton of copies out there. You don't have to go ahead and get a super high grade. This one I think is probably like a 7.5 or so, something along those lines. So either way, my personal copy. At some point I had like 3 or 4 copies of this book, but I kind of dwindled it down to one, sold a few off just to get some money back in the bank, but either way, one of my faves. Next up, of course, we have a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 238 and the first appearance of the Hobgoblin, okay? This issue, again, a lot of copies out there. I believe it's a Copper Age book, maybe right on the verge of the Bronze and Copper Age. Regardless, has the tattoos, it is complete, presents very well, probably in the 8.0 range, 8.5 range, possibly a 9.0, I'm not too sure. I don't need to slab everything in my collection. This is a great John Romita Jr. cover as well, but this is one of the ones that's a must-have if you're a Spidey collector, and there's not a lot of keys going on from 200 plus, like 200 to like 300. Not a lot of keys, only a few. We got what? This one and maybe the next one, and that's it. Of course, the next one, you know what I'm talking about. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 252, the first appearance of the symbiote costume in the Amazing Spider-Man run. This one is a newsstand. It was a CGC 9.2 that I cracked out because I wanted to keep this book raw. I know I'm nuts. A lot of people probably yell at me for this, but I like raw books. To me, I could go ahead and flip through this book and see and remember this storyline. Of course, I remember reading it when I was a kid, but either way, a must-have for Spidey collectors. And of course, the last book we're going to talk about is this key right here. It is a copy of Amazing Spider-Man number 300, the first full appearance of Venom. My copy is signed by Todd McFarlane, CGC 9.2, witness signature by the Todd father, with a great Venom label to boot, by the way. I bought this book for like $400 way back when. I definitely wanted this book with a Todd signature, only because, like I said to you guys before, there are a lot of copies out there of this book, so I have to like distinguish my copy from other copies. I would love to have maybe Stan Lee sign this book, but it's really not that important. I don't think Stan Lee was with the company at this point, but to me, everybody owns this book. It's an important book. It's a must own. Just get your copy. It can be whatever grade you want. It doesn't have to be a 9.8. I chose the 9.2 because it was affordable and it was signed by Todd. All right, that's it for this one, guys. My Amazing Spider-Man run from my AF-15 all the way up to Amazing Spider-Man number 300. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Did you watch this whole video? It was a long one. I didn't want to show you every freaking comic that I have, 1 to 301. So just picked out the keys and some of my favorite covers. And of course, reading some of these things as a kid, I absolutely adored. Mostly I read Bronze and Copper when I was a kid, but went back and read some of the older stuff as I got older. With that said, don't forget we are collectors of comics. We don't always read some of the stuff. I do understand that. Some people jumped down my throat recently talking about how I don't read modern comics. I get it. I'm not into the modern stuff. I collect this stuff because I am a collector of things that I enjoyed as a kid. So please don't forget that when you're watching my channel. This is all in good fun. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this one. This is Lawrence over at Mighty Comics and Collectibles saying thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys soon.